Hey everybody, it's me, JJ Panzer, your Smart Apartment Advisor here with another weekly Wednesday call. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad to have you. First things first, a little bit of housekeeping. This will be the only call this week, and I'm going to eliminate the Friday calls from now on unless there's something pressing that comes up or a big change in our industry. Right now, I just think that we've got enough. We can cover it in one call. So I'll look forward to seeing you on Wednesdays. Denise is here to join us with a legal perspective, and I have a few questions to ask her today about coping with this pandemic and how we're going to get through it. I will have Josh today going over a deal of the day, so Josh is ready to discuss that with us as well. So let me start out, marketing and renting apartments always a big topic of conversation, especially now that we're seeing the demand for our units is drastically reduced as a result of the pandemic. People aren't moving and people aren't coming here, and so therefore our demand has dried up. In the middle of all of this, this month, our marketing is going to change a little bit, because our property management software AppFolio that we use, that's the one that sends you all the emails and that keeps your portal and does all the work, the back end work for the tenants. It's kind of integral to what we do. It also includes our apartment posting software, and they, for many years, have provided us with the opportunity to post and syndicate our listings to other websites for free, because those websites wanted our content. And to the extent that the content really is the valuable part of that transaction, it's worked out just fine for a long time. But Zillow, Trulia, HotPads, it's all one company. They've gobbled up a bunch of different websites, and they provided a fair amount of leads and interest for our units. And they contacted us this month and said, it's not going to be free anymore. We're going to charge you to post on our website. And so at first my thought was, gee, I should probably stop doing that because I don't want to pay that bill. But the cost for the posting is $1.46 a day. So if you're on their website for a month, it's $42. And we did a little bit of background work and looked at where we were getting our leads from. And John looked at leads for the last 3 months. We had 207 guest cards come in, and 125 of them came from Zillow. So that's 60% of our traffic coming from Zillow. In the past, it was something like 80 or 90% of our traffic from Craigslist. And what's interesting is these websites have managed to do what I thought was not going to be possible, which was to supplant Craigslist. And we've actually leased 13 units in that period, and 5 of them are from Zillow leads. So we've closed 40% of our deals based on the leads that we're getting. So moving forward, I'm going to put us back onto the platforms. I cut it out for a couple of weeks, and we noticed we had a significant reduction in the amount of traffic. I will be, unfortunately, I have to bill all of you guys for the cost of this advertising, because I can't continue to pay for it out of my pocket, out of the commissions as well, because I'm also working with the leasing agents at Wavero and have to cut them in for the piece of the commission to do that job. So I'm going to send an email out later this week informing everybody that we're going to be doing it. And if you want to opt out of having it, I will be happy to not post your listings, but I think it's probably a good idea. And I'm going to be turning it back on. They're going to start charging us July 1st. So I'm going to turn it back on for another week and see what happens this weekend and through next week. I'm sure it's going to be an increase, but that's sort of the unfortunate. I mean, they've certainly picked a good time to do this. They've got us all over a barrel and demand is in the toilet. And now they're decided that it's time to start charging us, but that's how it works. That's business, right? But if you can get 10 extra leads into your apartment, for qualified tenants, it's probably worth $4.20 a piece, or $4.26, or whatever that works out to be, $4.50. So, that's one thing. I want to talk a little bit with Denise about sort of the coping with tenants who are in units who have been there for, a couple of years or less, have recent rents, and come to us asking for rent reductions based on market conditions. We've got a couple of different situations. We have situations now that are coming up with tenants who have signed leases in the last couple of months saying, well, I think my unit's worth less than it was when I signed my lease in March. And we also have situations with tenants who are, they're outside of their lease period and they want to make a commitment and stay. There's a couple of different ways to do this. We've talked about the free month's rent with a new term. We've also talked about the possibility of just writing them a check for a month's rent as an inducement to sign that new lease and make a commitment. Denise, can you tell us a little bit about the legal, pros and cons of each of those strategies and how we should be thinking of those?
Well, it's really dependent upon how the tenant is going to ultimately respond to it in the future, should they decide to change their minds or not honor the agreement. We have no law on this issue other than directive and information, or language, I should say, in the mayor's supplements that we can refer back to. There is nothing specific indicating what you're talking about, but there is specific language pertaining to if there is a rent deferment vis-a-vis COVID issues, that deferment or voluntary reduction by the landlord should not be held against the landlord in the future.
Okay.
You have a little bit of a different situation, but at the same time, what you're trying to do is accommodate the tenants. So ultimately, in your effort to accommodate the request by the tenants, I believe that you should be able to utilize the language in the supplement from the mayor's orders, confirming that other than your attempt to accommodate the tenant's request, you would not be doing this. I think that you could argue that the language of the supplements could be utilized for your free rent, cashback, etc., to incentivize tenants. With respect to a rent reduction, because of market conditions, that's a whole nother discussion. So if you're giving rent concessions and reducing rent, giving monies back, I think that's really a business decision. And how that will play out in the future is if you don't provide, if you have a lease and the tenants are requesting a reduction in the lease, I think unfortunately you've got them dead to rights.
Right.
But if you have month-to-month agreements and people are saying, I'd be willing to proceed and continue occupying if you give me a rent reduction, I think it's very fair for you to say, I will give you a rent reduction if you sign a 12-month commitment. But if you give a rent reduction on a month-to-month, I think you're stuck with that.
Right.
So there has to be a quid pro quo, and there has to be consideration in a contract. And if you're able to establish that, I think that you will be in as good a position as you possibly can before either the rent board or the San Francisco Superior Court. Okay.
And so do you feel like one situation offering a free month's rent, the first month on a 12-month lease, which gives them a 13-month commitment essentially, is that better than a 12-month lease with a cash payment at the signing?
I don't think there's either way.
Either way is better. Okay.
Right. Practically, it's the same.
Right.
Depending upon how you will organize it. If you give 13 months and a free month rent, and you're actually getting a 12-month rent,
right,
you're getting a year lease and 13-month.
Correct. You get a 13-month agreement as opposed to a 12-month agreement.
Correct.
And you're dividing 12 months worth of rent by 13. That's your effective rent, as opposed to getting 12 months and then dividing it by essentially 11.
That's right.
So it's a longer commitment with a higher base rent. So that helps.
Right.
Okay.
And there, language can be provided in the agreement in that one section. If you use the SFAA lease, when it says other conditions, I believe it's right above the signature pages. You can confirm why you're doing this. And I think it would need to be in the lease, and there would be, because as you know, sometimes leases can go on for many years, and at least you have some sort of recollection of what happened. How did this happen 5 or 6 years later?
Right, because I do recall having had that sort of a situation from probably the .com bust on a building that was sold in 2014 or something, and I looked back and there were multiple leases, and it was confusing to think, oh, that's right. We did a free month's rent with that tenant way back then, and they stayed.
Yeah.
And they never moved, and they're still there 14 years later. So yeah, I mean, it's good to memorialize that and make sure that it's in good shape.
Yeah.
To switch, unless anybody has any other questions about this particular topic, I want to switch gears to the political, because I saw something interesting. Bert, did you have a comment? Oh, hold on, unmute. Are you there?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, there you are.
When does this emergency end? Is it the end of July or the end of August or something like that? In other words, the declaration of emergency?
Currently,
Yeah.
Currently, the mayor's order ends June 30th. We may not serve notices for 60 days thereafter. So let's just assume it's going to be no earlier than June, July, August 31st. So the soonest we can serve notices is September, or right about there. It's literally 60 days. So we would count the days.
Okay.
Right. And then
And that's for residential. For commercial,
right.
the moratorium is through July 16 currently.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we need to remember there's a presumed spike in California. Today is the 24th. Typically, the mayor has extended the orders only days before the end of the month. So I'm not going to be surprised, God forbid, that she extends again next week, early next week.
Yeah, that's almost certainly going to happen.
That's what I think, yeah.
Yeah, there's no way.
And now currently, too, there's an automatic extension for the tenants to remit payments for 6 months after the moratorium ends.
Right.
Which means that, let's assume it's June 30th. They do not need to pay rent even from April until 6 months after June 30th.
So at the end of the year.
Correct.
Right. And I don't know if you were on the call when I was discussing Nicholas talking about how Supervisor Haney's office wrote back and said, remember that the moratorium and the fact that the tenant protection ordinance eliminates the right to evict based on COVID-related losses, the tenant's responsibility to pay isn't removed. And, it was sort of a head scratcher, like, okay, so what else motivates them to pay? Right? I mean.
Well, right. Well, there's a breach. You can sue them for breach of contract.
Right. But I mean, it
needs to be monetarily, it needs to make sense monetarily to file
right.
a lawsuit you can't chase vapor. So
right.
If the tenants just disappear and they decide to go to Alaska, how are you going to find them?
You're never going to get it.
Right.
Have you heard anything new about, assistance for small landlords who need the help for collecting these balances? Or is this an empty promise that's just never going to be fulfilled?
Well, we saw last week, right after our call, there was some information indicating that there is going to be some legislation provided by the state that they will assist landlords. I have no idea where that is. And right. I'm not interested in really following it until right. I know what's going on in July.
Right, right. Interestingly, I got an email today from the National Association of Residential Property Managers urging all of their members. Now, this is the 1 to 4 unit property management, industry trade group, urging their members to reach out to the state to oppose SB 1410, which is the legislation that's sponsored by the Apartment Association at the state level to provide the tax credits for small property owners whose tenants are unable to pay. And so it would be like a 10-year repayment plan. And I just thought it was very interesting that the different real estate industry trade groups were so splintered on this issue that they're opposing each other's legislation. But it gives you a sense of just how difficult this is to work on, especially under the circumstances, under duress, and where nobody's really expecting to be made whole by this. Everybody's going to lose.
Yeah.
Everybody's losing.
What was the rationale for the the National Property Management Group?
Their rationale, and once again, it's mostly single family, their clients are mostly single family homeowners,
I see.
but their rationale was their clients, the owners of the properties, just weren't going to be able to float 10 years worth of payments, float the balance for 10 years to get paid back because they need to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Mm-hmm.
nobody really has any sympathy for landlords who need to eat. So,
Right. Well, it's the same argument as what is very concerning about the Costa-Hawkins amendments and changes to Costa-Hawkins on the ballot. While we have the real estate industry strongly pushing to maintain that, we also have the trade union saying, oh my God, no, we've got to get rid of Costa-Hawkins because of their constituency. And yet many of the trade unions have to do with construction. So
right.
it's the push-pull constantly. It's kind of like Airbnb in San Francisco. Some landlords love it, some landlords hate it. Some tenants love it, some tenants hate it. It's the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. Does anybody else have legal or political questions they'd like to share before we move on to the sales spotlight? Anybody thoughts or ideas? Okay. With that, I will bring Josh in and have him. Thank you for being with us, Denise. I appreciate it.
Barbara
Thank you for your
Barbara has a question.
Oh, Barbara has a question. Barbara. Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself, Barbara. I'm going to try to do that. Oh, there you are.
Okay. The question is if you're making a deal on the rent, that has to be done prior to them lifting the COVID-19 restrictions, right?
No, if their inability to pay rent is due to COVID for the period of time, for example, if they lost their job in May and they couldn't pay rent, and they're coming to you and say, oh my gosh, now I have a job, I want to make a deal on the rent for May, they can do that now still.
No, I'm talking about for a vacancy, for a new tenant moving in. The reduction, the deal that you're going to reduce their rent or give them money back, it has to be done prior to
The expiration of the mayor's order.
Right.
Is that correct? Yes.
Right.
That's
well,
correct.
If you've got a tenant coming to you saying, if it's a brand new tenant, it's a brand new
Right.
tenant. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to be applicable in a situation where you've got a vacancy and you're trying to rent the unit, because that's a market-based enticement to get them to enter into that contract. And the
Right.
focus of the conversation here is really around the tenants who've moved in the last 18 months or something, and they say, well, you're advertising a unit down the hall for $29.95 and I'm paying $3,300.
Right.
And I want to pay $29.95. Well, I don't want you to pay $29.95. I'd rather you keep paying the $3,300, but I'll give you a month's free rent now to give you an effective rent that's lower over the course of the next 12
I thought
months.
you were offering this to new tenants coming in. Okay, totally misunderstood.
We are doing that as well, but it is not as fraught and complicated for them because you're simply putting that into the agreement, and you're not necessarily making an adjustment there. But I've also found that has had absolutely no effect on demand for those units. Advertising the free month is not getting me anywhere. And so I just dropped the price on my 2-bedroom in North Beach from $35.75 to $33.95 and got rid of the free month's rent because it wasn't getting me anywhere. And I'm just hoping I'll get somebody because it's getting late in the game on that one. So I'm just trying to get, to the point where we'll get a tenant, get some rent coming in soon. But once again, all the reasons that anybody wants to live in North Beach are gone for now. And so it's hard to find anybody who wants to live in North Beach if they can't go out to eat and to party.
Right.
So,
okay.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I got it.
Any other thoughts or ideas, anybody? Okay. Well, Josh, let me bring you in here. I will put you on the big screen. Hi there.
Hello. How are
How's
you?
it going?
Good.
So I hear you have a new deal for us today.
Yeah, you know this deal well.
I know this one well.
Disabled attendee screen sharing. Can you give me?
Hold on, I can give you access to that. Just a second. Advanced. All participants can share. There you go. Okay.
All right. There we go. All right. So this is my listing, actually. This is a building we have under management. How long we've been managing it, JJ? How many years?
3.5 years.
Yeah.
And
So
you
this
just
is
got
a
a big
client.
price decrease on this one, which is why it now is why it's now a buy.
Yeah, it's become more appealing. We were kind of very aggressive on pricing coming out. It did not work. We got caught in the COVID crisis, and we've now come down quite a bit. This is a two properties side by side, 7 units total in the inner Richmond, 2 blocks from Golden Gate Park, on Balboa Street and 6th Avenue. Mixed use. So you have 3 commercial units, 2 on Balboa Street, 1 over on 6th Avenue, and then 4 residential units. Nice Edwardian building. Deferred maintenance for sure, but a new roof. It has a fair amount of updates, needs some more. This building, so I'm just going to consider one building for this conversation. So I'm priced at $311 a square foot, which is pretty phenomenal at this point. The total price for 7 units, $2,375,000. So from a price perspective, you're not going to beat it. I'll get to why it's priced so low. It's related largely to the commercial units that I'll explain more. But this is a nice. This is what I consider a true add value deal. This is not for the novice investor. There's in order to kind of get full value out of this building, there's construction involved. There's some tenant management issues, and there's some potential to add on to the building, to build, to add units. And so there's a lot going on here, but there's also a lot of value to add. I'll move to the next slide here. So here are my rents. So as I mentioned, the 3 commercial units are vacant, which is problematic right now to have a lot of vacant commercial spaces. Thus, my pricing is reflecting that. Over there for retail rentals, you're looking at $3 a square foot or so on the high side, which is quite low compared to the rest of the city. But once leased up, you're looking at $15,000 a month in gross rent, and then your upside is you have an opportunity to get up to about $23,000 plus. So you have some nice room to build up. Going into the deal, I have it at a 5.85 cap. I've been talking a lot about the +5 cap returns that are now in San Francisco that you never saw before. So now I'm more in line with kind of where I think you need to be competitive, especially for a deal like this that requires some time, some money, some effort, and some construction. But at that cap rate, it has a nice return built into it for sure. I mean, I'm at $339 a door on 7 units, $339,000 a door. Also low. Normally you're seeing $500 a door in San Francisco. So I'll get to why it's complicated.
Let's get to the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room is here are the commercial spaces, not yet habitable. So we took over this building for management. We had a quote unquote tenant in this space, and who needed to be evicted. They were evicted, and they were non-payment, right? I mean, it was pretty straightforward, right, JJ?
No, not really. It was based on the fact that the 2 spaces were illegally merged. The problem is that they're 2 commercial spaces, and many years ago without permits and without the benefit of a whole lot of actual forethought. The two spaces in two separate buildings on two separate parcels were merged. They just knocked a hole in the two walls and put some steel in and said, let's make this one commercial space. And when I saw that, I said, gee, this is a violation of the California Building Code. We can't continue to do this. And so we notified that tenant that he'd have to leave, and then it became obvious that it was also complicated by the fact that he had rented a space in the back of the commercial space that had a bathroom and a quasi kitchen to somebody to live there. And they didn't speak any English, and they had no idea why we were talking to them and who we were, and they started fighting with us. And so we figured that out, and then we realized that the space was also full of asbestos and lead, and we'd have to abate those hazards if we wanted to really look at how to separate the two spaces legally. And that was when the budget got to the point where the owner said, you know what, I don't think I want to do this anymore. There's too much deferred maintenance, and we'd rather sell. And so we presented them with the listing agreement, and then the bottom fell out of the market. So that's where we're at on that one.
Yeah, and so that's, we put together architectural drawings to put these two units back together. We talked to some structural folks to how to re-separate the utilities. So there's a pathway here to get them separated and built back up and have them be rented. I've always imagined the best buyer for this is an owner user. So a business owner, a contractor, especially who needs an office, wants an office, nice corner space, and can do the work, or anybody who's relatively sophisticated in terms of construction projects and managing that. So, and right now I'm getting a lot of traction with owner users now that my prices come down. And so there's, it's high visibility, great corner, nice spot. It's just going to require some work and some money and some time, but doable.
That inner Richmond neighborhood is actually really pretty charming. You've got a lot of local businesses that are really great in that first 10 blocks of Clement Street and Geary. There's the Cinderella's Bakery nearby, and a couple of other really great businesses that are they're a draw. I've got other buildings in the neighborhood that are they do well. This west side of town has actually not seen as much of a decrease in rents in the last 3 or 4 months during the pandemic. The rents weren't as high as the rest of town, but it doesn't seem like they've come down as much either. So hopefully, this part of town is fairly stable and does well rent-wise. Now, you're not going to have a lot of rent movement with the residential tenants because they've been there a long time, and the group of them is closely knit together. But the commercial space is really the place where the risk and reward both can be found.
Right. Nice Edwardian architectural details here in the units. There is another small commercial space on the other side, on the 6th Avenue side, and then 2 garages. Some people are talking about adding ADUs, potentially getting rid of the garages and putting 2 ADUs back there. There's also thought on putting an ADU behind one of these commercial spaces on Balboa Street, so tucking in like a studio or 1 bedroom back there. So anyway, there's some nice add value opportunities here, but not for your novice investor. It's going to take some thought and some planning.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's going to be some work and an investment to get there, which is the challenge. So, well, thank you. That's great, and I appreciate your bringing that one to all of us now that we've adjusted the price accordingly. Yes. And I'm happy to share that, and I will be making some updates and sending out blasts with some of these deals that we've talked about. If anybody's interested, we'll be happy to share them. And if you're interested in looking at anything else, just let us know. we're always happy to talk about it. So that's pretty much it for today. Does anybody else have thoughts or ideas right now? Oh, I did have one other thing to share about our deferral requests. Let me just pull up this spreadsheet I was looking at. I went through, I was thinking about other ways to quantify the requests that we've received based on these deferrals. And one of the things that was really interesting was that we have a couple of tenants who have asked for very small amounts of money, but the focus, I think, really needs to be on making sure that we keep the amount of money that's being deferred at a reasonable level. And the tenants have been very cooperative in that regard. As far as the amount of money deferred as a percentage of a month's rent, we only have a couple of tenants that are more than 1 month's rent, which, you know, the reason why I bring that up is because obviously our security deposit generally is more than a month's rent, typically a month and a half. And, you know, if you're thinking about, you know, how to quantify that, the average amount of the deferrals was something like 70% of a month's rent. I've got 3 tenants who are above 100% of a month's rent, which includes one that's at 104%, so essentially 1 month's rent, one that's at 135%, one at 145%, and another one's 101%. And the rest of them are, you know, between, you know, some of the lower ones are under 50. And so, you know, my lowest one is 7%, which is kind of odd. We've got a tenant who pays $5,700 in rent and wanted to defer $400, which is, you know, it's really kind of a request for a renegotiation of the lease, but it's a deferral instead of a, you know, a request for a reduction. But, you know, for the most part, these are all recoverable within the security deposit. Let me just switch myself back here. For the most part, these are all recoverable within the security deposit. And I think it's interesting and encouraging to see, once again, that our tenants are, you know, they're doing everything that they can. And I really appreciate their conscientiousness and their concerted effort to stay on top of the rent payments and to take it seriously. So, you know, it's been difficult and it's been challenging, but it's also encouraging to see that people aren't going out of their way to try to take advantage of the situation. So anyway, something positive to end the conversation, and glad to have you. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you again next week. I'll email everybody later this week with the information for next week. Take care, everybody. I will talk to you later. Thanks for joining me.
All right,
and
bye.
be well and stay healthy.